Page 7 gets into review of bank reconciliation and long-term outstanding checks. Delinquent tax in it, just by its very nature, when you've got people that have moved out of town, there are a lot of checks that stay outstanding for a long period of time. But we were asked, based on an article in the Herald Journal on October 12th, there was some discussion of an individual asking the department head to hold checks for a period of time. We did look into that. We did talk to personnel there, and we came to the conclusion that there were a substantial amount of checks that were held at the request of an individual that didn't want them issued at that time. Now, they were held long enough that at some point in time, when it was time to pay them, that they went to, or the department head went to internal auditor and maybe the assistant administrator, I'm not sure exactly, and wanted to know if one check could be reissued for all 20. And he was basically told that would be fine, which I do not see any reason that that wouldn't be fine to reissue a check for them. Now, the implication was they had okayed the holding of the checks, but to my knowledge and talking with them, they did not know those 20 checks were being held at the request of this individual. The rest of you can read through the rest of the narrative there. We looked at other outstanding checks, and we noticed, like I said, there were a lot of them, but we didn't notice anything. And we discussed it with the current staff that was down there, if there were anything that red flags that raised to them, and there were not any. One problem also with that was that there's certain escheat rules for how long you hold a check. Once you issue a check to somebody and they don't cash it, the escheat laws come in and state you've got to remit that amount of dollars to the state. When the prior accountant, who was the CPA, was here, that was being done. It hasn't been done since then. So our two findings and recommendations on page 8. The finding was the department head did hold redemption checks at request of a tax sale bidder, and we observed that the escheat laws were not being followed, and state that we need to do that.
What was the total of those, the grand total of all that?
But the checks that were held, I'm not sure.
263,000.
It was close to $300,000.
How long were they held?
Held for a period of months, and they were voided in around 5 to 6 months. They were held, and then they were voided, and another check, single check issued.
Yeah, 5 to 6 months or longer.
Did you find out why they were being held?
Well, what was stated in the paper, they were being held because the fellow's going through a divorce. All I can tell you is that's what the people told us that they were taking. We did not talk to the individual that the checks were written to. On page 9, we start with procedure D and procedure E. This gets into the disbursement side. The first part is we extracted checks within the DBS system, which is the system within delinquent tax of where they write checks for properties that have been, that the taxes have been paid up, and they send out refunds, that type of thing. Of those systems we went through, printed out, we saw no instances. They were all being written within, for the nature of what they were supposed to be. We've got a list of the top 60, and every year we were going to get the management to peruse through, because they're basically names of people, that are on delinquent tax files for whatever reason, and we would know not know if there's any consequence of that. But in our review, it looked like the checks were being issued for what they were supposed to. In procedure E, we went into we're back now in the county's general fund disbursements, which falls under the county's procurement system, which we've all talked about a good bit in the last audit. And part of what we would look at was to see if there was any required supporting documentation for those payments. And as it's explained here how we did it and the amount of checks that were there and the results of the three departments that we had. There were 2,441 vouchers. If you remember, a voucher is something that a check is written to finance and there's approval on the voucher and finance pays it. The check goes to the county, or there's supposed to be approval on the voucher. Let's put it that way. But those are the checks were written. We sampled 97 items to observe documentation. Now we've got about 7 instances here I'm going to read of checks that were written that we found, and these are the reasons that they were done, and they concerned us, but they're up for y'all's discretion. We found that county employees were paid for properly posting services through accounts payable, not payroll. What we're saying, you've got employees, the labor law, once you've got an employee, you can't pay them part-time. You can't pay them on the side. It's got to all be run through payroll. And apparently there were some individuals that were posting for delinquent tax that were employees that were getting paid outside the system as far as payroll. The internal audit was done in 2010, and she caught that and brought it to the department head's attention in April, and eventually that was stopped in October of 2010. So April was the date on that, August. So as of August it was going on, September, October, so eventually that was stopped. Another issue was we have former county employees were contracted to do posting services without using the Spartanburg County procurement ordinance. In other words, the approvals that go through on when who's going to provide services and that. We noticed that one such employee, former employee, now these are people that are not employees of the county anymore, but they're working part-time, not under your payroll system. But one such employee was paid a total of $46,000 over a 7-month period. That's what his checks posted for doing postings. Now, procurement policies would have been, there should have been some approvals and things like that, but none were noted. Several of the largest vendors of the 3 departments had no contracts in place. There was no evidence of having filed the procurement ordinance for competitive bidding or quoting as may have been required. There was also no sole source documentation located. We noticed there were of that 69, there were 2 purchase orders for 2 items over $1,000. There were no quotes attached indicating compliance with the procurement ordinance requirements for obtaining quotes.
Say what you bought?
No, sir. I'm not sure what that was.
Those were boxes, storage boxes.
Storage boxes. Okay, the next, there were several other voucher expenditures to Chick-fil-A, and it was noted on there, lunch for moving expenses, jailhouse annex. We inquired as to what that meant, and we were told that the former department head furnished lunch to inmates providing moving labor. Allegedly, this labor also included moving several boxes and personal items belonging to the former department head in various storage areas. That was all outlined in that paper article went out back a couple of months ago.
What, Stan, define several. 3 or 103?
Well, I think later on, that issue comes up, and the number that comes out that we were told was close to 150. The total checks to, the other issue was that we were told that these Department of Corrections individuals were sent over here with bad lunches when they provided this service. But there were 11 transactions to Chick-fil-A totaling $1,245.
With those 11 transactions, would that be for 11 people, or could that be 11 transactions for several people, or do you have?
I think it's individual times. In other words, it could have been multiple people, but it happened 11 times. Or 11 different days, that type of thing. Is that correct?
11 days,
Yeah, there were 11 different
varying
days.
number of meals provided.
Okay. The next one, we observed 52 items of expense reimbursements totaling $22,000 to the former department head. We checked to see if these reimbursements complied with Section 16.3 of the employee manual regarding expense reimbursements. Those requirements are listed there at the bottom of page 10. Travel and expense reimbursements must be submitted to finance within 7 days. The county administrator approves department head expense vouchers. Vouchers not previously prepared and supported with receipts will not be reimbursed. Conference agendas must be attached. Meal receipts must be itemized. County will not reimburse expenses for alcohol. 50 of the 52 items were travel expense reimbursements. We noted compliance on the vouchers at D, E, and F. They were tested by the finance office before they were paid. A, B, and C, the county administrator did not approve them. They weren't necessarily supported with receipts. And you'll notice there's a schedule on the next page. It says travel and expense reimbursements must be submitted within 7 days of the trip to be reimbursed. Well, that's not on the next page. We'll get to that in a minute.
Dan,
Yes, sir.
Will you ever break that down and give me a dollar figure as to those that do not apply?
I'll get to that. I'm sorry. I thought that there's 2 sections here and there's a very big schedule in the back. Out of the 50 travel reimbursements, only 2 were approved, and they were approved by the Deputy County Administrator, Mr. Hill. And I guess the significance to that is there was a directive sent out by him late in 2011 that all of the vouchers would be approved by him. So after that date, there were 2 in there that the county deputy administrator approved, but the rest had no approvals from anybody.
Who just said, pay without proper signatures? Why was he reimbursed?
You know, the answer that as you go and talk is that things were brought up to certain people and they were said, well, department heads